Father, I pray that this morning you would take your great word and you would take what little bit I have to offer and you would do something powerful. That you would speak to us. And even though this was written a long time ago, and it concerned people who lived a long time ago, and it deals with events that happened a long time ago, I pray that you would make it real and living to us and show us the life that we should live and the choices that we should make. And I pray this in the name of your Son. Amen. Amen. All right. Well, today we are in Isaiah chapters 46 and 47. I had a difficult time coming up with a title for this lesson because there's at least two main thoughts, but you'll see that they do connect, but they're very different. They're very different. Chapter 46. Well, let's just read 46, 1 through 7. And I'm wondering, Wally, could you read that for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Bel bows down. Nebo stoops low. Their idols are borne by beasts of burden. The images that are carried about are burdensome, a burden for the weary. They stoop and bow down together, unable to rescue the burden. They themselves go off into captivity. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, all you who remain of the house of Israel, you whom I have upheld since you were conceived, and have carried since your birth. Even to your old age and gray hairs, I am he who will sustain you. I have made you, and I will carry you. I will carry you, I will sustain you, and I will rescue you. To whom will you compare me or count me equal? To whom will you liken me that we may be compared? Some pour out gold from their bags and weigh out silver on the scales. They hire a goldsmith to make it into a god. They bow down and worship it. They lift it to their shoulders and carry it. They set it up in place, and there it stands. From that spot it cannot move. Though one cries out to it, it does not answer. I cannot save him from his troubles. Remember this, and fix in your mind. Take heart, you rebels. Remember the former things, those of long ago. I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. Oops, read one verse over. Sorry.
It's okay, we'll pick it up. All right, so Isaiah begins with a reference to two Babylonian gods. He talks about Bel and Nebo. Nebo. So Bel is a word that simply means Lord. This also was the word that was used in Canaan for their primary god, Baal. It's the same word, just different language. But it means Lord or master. And this is the title in Babylon that was used of Marduk, the city god of Babylon. Right? So it was one of his other names. And Nebo was Marduk's son. And he was the god of the scribe and the intellectual pursuits. And his name features prominently in many Babylonian leaders like Nabopolassar, Nebuchadnezzar, Nabonidus. They're all conjugations of that word Nebo. Okay? And these two gods were the most prominent in Babylon, but especially appropriate to Isaiah's point here is that their images were carried around in an annual New Year's festival in Babylon. So they would put them on carts, and they would parade them around, and they would have, the priests walking with them, and everybody would clap, and so on. And so this is the image that we have here in these verses of this annual festival. You know, they have to be carried around. They're not going to carry themselves. They're not going to walk on their own. They have to be carried around, Isaiah says. Verse 2 is interesting. It says, they stoop and bow down together. They themselves go off into captivity. And when I came to this verse, I struggled for, I was going to say for a day or so. Frankly, it wasn't that long, but I didn't have that much time during those 2 days to do some research. But, you know, this is obviously about Babylon and what's going to happen to Babylon very soon. And it says, they themselves go off into captivity. I'm thinking, I don't think the Babylonians went into captivity when the Persians came in. And in fact, that's right, they didn't. Persia did not send their conquered nations into captivity. And so this phrase is a little bit odd. In fact, there are some critics who will say, well, this just goes to show that Isaiah got it wrong. You know, it's a false prophecy. But I think that it's not necessarily, it's not a specific prophecy. It's simply saying, you know, if you have to carry your God around, he's not going to deliver you. He's not going to deliver you from captivity if that's where you go. He's going to go right along with you. Right. Powerless. Right. They're just powerless. It is not a specific prophecy. It's an image that Isaiah uses, but he uses all the time many images, as you know, as we read through this book. And then in verse 3, he turns to Israel. He says, O house of Jacob, all you who remain of the house of Israel. He's trying to bring their long history to mind of all of that has happened. You know, in all of that time that God has been with you, when did you have to carry God? You know, never. All that time, you have not had to carry God. In fact, God has carried you. God says, I have carried you since you were born. This is a beautiful picture, really, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It combines, several images. The image of a father carrying his child. It's the image of a shepherd carrying a lamb. It's the image of an eagle carrying its eaglets. It's all combined together because God, Isaiah says, God carries you. Even to your old age and gray hairs. Now that's interesting because normally people grow up and they stop being carried around, don't they? Yeah. And in fact, when you get older, sometimes you might have to carry your parents, right? But that's not the way it is with God. We're never going to come to a time when God has gotten old and tired and we have to carry him and we need to seek some other stronger, younger God in order to take his place. God continues to carry us into our old age. We continue to need him throughout our lives. Notice all the I statements in verse 4. I am he who will sustain you. I have made you. I will carry you. I will sustain you. I will rescue you. What should we make of all those I statements?
I think they needed to hear that.
The people there at that time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they needed to hear that there is no other.
There's no other. There's no other.
So much he loves them, that he'll carry them and support them and do all these things for him.
Right. There wasn't anybody else who was going to do it either, was there? Just him. Is that a message that we need?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I will sustain you. I have made you. I will carry you. I will sustain you. And I will rescue you. Sometimes it would be nice to be rescued, huh? We need rescuing. All right. Then verses 5 through 7, Isaiah talks about who are you going to compare God to? Who are you going to compare me to, God says? To one of these gods that you make out of gold, and you hire a goldsmith to make it? Verse 7, they lift it to their shoulders and carry it. And here this theme of carrying returns. So either this is the owner that picks up this newly made god and carries it home. Either that may be what he's talking about. Or it could be a return to the parade image that we had at the beginning. In either case, they're not moving on their own. You know, they're being carried along. So then Isaiah comes to a specific prophecy as to what is going to happen in the future for Babylon. That God has a purpose, and specifically he has a purpose for this guy named Cyrus that's going to be coming. And God's purpose is sure. It's for sure going to happen because God said it. Let's read verses 8 through 13. We'll go ahead and read those verses again. 8 through 13. Mary, could you read that for us?
Remember this, fix it in mind, take it to heart, you rebels. Remember the former things, those of long ago. I am God, and there is no other. I am God, there is none like me. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. From the east I summon a bird of prey, from a far-off land a man to fulfill my purpose. What I have said, that will I bring about. What I have planned, that will I do. Listen to me, you stubborn-hearted, you who are far from righteousness. I am bringing my righteousness near. It is not far away, and my salvation will not be delayed. I will grant salvation to Zion, my splendor to Israel.
Okay. So, verse 8 begins, remember this. And it's hard to know whether remember this refers to what he's just said, and you're supposed to remember that. Or remember this, does that refer to what he's going to say just next?
Right.
Grammatically, it could be either way. And sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's the other. And commentaries are pretty much evenly divided as to what it means here. The reality is, verses 8 through 13 are, in essence, a summary of what has gone on from before. So whether it's looking back or whether it's looking forward, the result is really the same.
Right.
Since what follows is a summary. Remember this. Fix it in mind. Take it to heart, you rebels. Who's he talking to?
Israelites.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. And he's calling them rebels. So, go. Yes. Steve, did you have something? Or was it you?
I would just say, call us rebels too.
Yes, yes. So these are people who are not just a people of a little faith that needs to be encouraged. These are people whose entire tendency has been towards unbelief. It must have been difficult for Israel because they lived in a world where the great majority of people believed in many gods, and they were gods that they were comfortable with because they had made them up themselves. Their character was made up by the human creators. Their representation was made up by the human creators. But here Israel had a God that was totally other, that was totally invisible. And he was self-existent. He made himself. But yet he didn't have a beginning. How was this possible? God was self-existent, and he spoke uncomfortable commands into their lives. Right? Well, that made Israel totally different than all the other nations around, and it must have been really, really difficult to continue with that belief system, don't you think? how big of a contrast is it between our belief system and the surrounding culture today?
Oh,
Huge is huge.
Is it? In what ways?
well, for one thing, the way we look at sexuality, I mean, I think that believers should look at sexuality as being something between husbands and wives,
Mm-hmm.
and the culture doesn't look at it that way at all. It's a very free look at sexuality, how you dress. There's not much modesty in the culture anymore,
Yeah,
and yet God still calls us to be modest in our dress.
whatever.
Okay. What other
I was-
contrasts do you see? Go ahead.
I was just blown away by the halftime show
Yeah.
of
Oh,
the
yeah.
Super Bowl and recognizing how, to me, I mean, it was just so sexualized. And the women that did it, J-Lo and Shakira, really focused on their empowerment and, you know, and that's how the culture looks at it. To me, it's so different than what the Bible is calling us to do. And that's just one example of what's going on in the world, whether it be in politics or entertainment or whatever. The ways of this world are so different than the ways of God's
Looks
kingdom.
like when Moses came down off the hill. I mean, the halftime show.
No kidding.
Well, I feel like there was a huge contrast too when people were calling out the fact that this was inappropriate for
Oh,
a
yeah.
family
Right.
slotted type of TV show when you
Yeah.
had lots of kids, little kids watching.
Yeah.
But the blowback I would see people get from expressing that concern
Yeah.
was that, you shouldn't feel that way, this is women's empowerment, like you said.
Loosen up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was very sad that there didn't seem to be any legitimization of the people who felt assaulted, and their families felt assaulted. I mean, honestly, it needed to come with a warning before the program started.
Oh, yeah.
So people could turn it off if they wanted to, but I also,
Yeah.
I think of our culture as, also, just a little, to segue from that, is like, your God is your God, my God is my
Right.
God, everybody's God is okay. I think that is a big part of our culture. Nobody wants to say, no, that's not right,
We're polytheistic
yeah.
in that regard.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Another example of that was like some key friends of mine who are part of the Wesleyan Covenant Association posted how distraught they were over watching that with their parents, their grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw a son of a college friend of mine who was showing his young twin girls watching the halftime show and saying how they loved it.
Oh,
Wow.
You know, and it just
Interesting.
hit me hard. Here are these little 8-year-old girls who were loving the show, and their parents were. It
They were-
just
the parents
showed
were
me
okay in that
the
sense.
total opposite of
Yeah.
what God's kingdom's calling us to
Stan,
live.
Stan's nephew's son, apparently Greg's son,
Oh.
Julie said, Asher or Deacon, I can't remember, he said, I don't think I should be watching this. This is much too sexual for me, and he got up and left the room.
wow,
He's probably 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
wow, self-control.
Well, bless his soul.
I know,
Somebody's
right?
taught him
Julie
well.
was so
But
proud of him,
the-
and she
the
was.
different
Yep.
culture they're a part of.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think another thing, contrast we have is our understanding of truth.
Mm.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
Is there such a thing as truth, by the way?
right.
What is
Yeah.
truth? That was.
What's true for you may not be true for me. Um,
Yeah.
Or, if you do believe in truth, it's because of, scientific discovery that can bring you to some truth.
I think another way that we're different is that, believers see every person as made in the image of God, and non-believers don't see that.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's how they look at people. There are people who are not worth much, and anyway, I don't know, that's,
Mhm.
I think.
So notice, what was the cure for this rebellion, for this unbelief. So the cure in verse 8 was not more faith. The cure was memory. Remembering all that God had done for them. And that was their cure for unbelief.
And take it to heart.
Yes. Yes. What has God done? And I think that there are times when we get so low in our spiritual life. That's a good technique.
Amen.
You know, we remember all that God has done for us. And sometimes we can be so low we can't remember anything that God has ever done for us. Well, then think about what he's done for somebody else. What did he do for David? And what did he do for Abraham? And what did he do for Isaiah? And, you know, because sometimes you are so tuned into your own pain and misery that you can't see anything good God has done. But you might be able to see something good that he's done for somebody
You know,
else.
I think that that's an interesting thing, because at Thanksgiving often, you know, that gets to be the question, what are you thankful for, you know, which really is, you know, what has God done in your life? And I find one of the things, if somebody will come out with a good thing of what God has done, it really engenders people, oh yeah, you know, now I mean, I really think that's one of the values of your witness is, you know, if you can come up with, this is what I saw God doing this year, I'm thankful for, I think other people then come up with, you know, oh yeah, you know, I think we're so forward-looking that we don't ever, you know, look back and say, you know, this is what God's done. I try to keep at the end of the year a book. I write down. I try to get my kids and my grandkids to tell me, what did God do in your life this year? And I write it down because I don't remember very well, you know. And it's good to flip back and say, oh yeah, that year God did this and this and this and this, you know. Because by nature, I don't think we're that kind of people. But
They need that encouragement.
yeah, but it's hard to get them to do it.
God's faithfulness to us, which gives us hope, because he's a God of promise who fulfills.
That's the reason I really treasure a daily devotion like the Upper Room, because one after another and after another, they're telling, they realize what God has done in their life. Many of them say it that way. They look back and put together an awareness that God had gotten them to that point. They didn't do it on their own. They couldn't.
We're terribly
I wish
ungrateful
everybody was
people.
reading this.
We like to, what's the next thing God's going to do for me, not thank you for what you did
Yeah.
yesterday.
They expect God to be
Well,
with them.
you put a label, you say, it's kind of like puzzle pieces that when you're living your past, you know, it's like puzzle pieces. And then when you look back, it's put together. Oh, that's the reason for this, and then you put a label that God did that. You know, so you see God's work. You know.
Let's take a look
So
at
image our God anyway.
verse 10. God says, I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times what is still to come. This is another one of God's claims that he can tell what's coming up next. He can foretell the future.
Oh yeah.
And he says, my purpose will stand. In other words, what God says is going to happen, it indeed will. And then he gives a specific example. You know, if you need to know that this is for sure, here's an example. From the east, I summon a bird of prey. From a far-off land, a man to fulfill my purpose. Now, looking back, we can see, well, he was referring to Cyrus, wasn't he? Cyrus is just about ready to take over Babylon, and the people who read this were going to see God's prophecy at work, and they were going to know that his purposes stand.
I just thought of Cyrus, who basically rescued the people out of Babylon.
He did.
That's that man from the east,
That's right, exactly.
right? Am I right about geography?
You are absolutely right. He did come from the east. And It was a bird of prey. So when the end of Babylon comes, it will come with the unannounced suddenness of a hawk diving on a rabbit. Just suddenly, there it is. And the fall of Babylon was very, very fast.
It was just like one night to the next, right?
It was a little bit more than a day, but yeah, it was very quick. Verse 12, 13. Listen to me, you stubborn-hearted, you who are far from righteousness. I am bringing my righteousness near. Isn't that interesting? The people he's speaking to are far from righteousness, but God is going to bring his righteousness near. Now, righteousness in this case probably is a reference to God's deliverance. God had made a covenant with Israel to be their defender, to be their God. And so it was right and righteous that he then deliver them from their enemies. And so it's a reference to righteousness, and we can get a view to this by the parallelism we see in verse 13. I am bringing my righteousness near, it is not far away, and my salvation will not be delayed. So he's paralleling righteousness with salvation, meaning they're the same thing he's talking about here. Salvation and righteousness are the same thing here, and he's bringing his salvation. I will grant salvation to Zion, my splendor to Israel. How was God going to bring salvation to Zion here?
Say that again, I didn't quite.
In verse 13, he says, I will grant salvation to Zion.
No, your question.
Yeah, so how was God going to bring salvation to Zion? What was he going to do?
And a savior.
Ultimately, yes. But immediately in the historical context,
Well, he was gonna let them go back home.
he was going to let them go back home.
Cyrus would come in and let them go back home.
That's right. And the salvation to Zion was coming about by the fall of Babylon. So what was really good news for Zion was bad news for Babylon. God was going to deliver his people by the destruction of the Babylonians, which is the subject of the next chapter. Verse 13 is the hinge between the two.
Right.
God is going to bring salvation, and he's going to bring salvation by the fall of Babylon. So that Zion and Babylon are at opposite ends of the spectrum. We have one city, and we have the other city, and they are opposites.
It's kind of interesting picture if you want to extend it all the way out to our salvation. You can't have salvation without a repentance and a falling away from your previous life. You know, it's like this picture of
Our Babylon.
our Babylon. Right, exactly.
Yeah. So let's take read verses, chapter 47, 1 through 3. Holly, could you read that for us?
Go down and sit in the dust, virgin daughter Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, daughter Chaldea, because they will no longer call you tender and pampered. Take the millstones and grind flour. Remove your veil, strip off your robe, expose your thighs, wade through the rivers. Your nakedness will be exposed and your disgrace will be seen. I will take vengeance. No one will intervene.
All right. So Isaiah is now speaking directly to Babylon, and he's building up an interesting picture. He's referring to Babylon as a virgin daughter, as a young woman. And look at all the different descriptions he uses. She's a virgin, she's a daughter, she's a queen, she's tender, she's delicate. I think your version said she's pampered. So this is a privileged young woman who has luxurious tastes. Right? And God says, go down and sit in the dust. So this dainty young woman is brought down to the ground, and it just seems rather brutal and harsh. You know, go sit in the dust. And furthermore, take millstones and grind flour. So working at millstones was very, very difficult work, and it was considered the lowest of all the slave work in that time. Take off your veil. So she's not going to be able to wear that veil anymore that was used to keep her precious beauty hidden from all those common people. She has to take off the veil. She's not able to wear the long flowing robes that she was accustomed to because she has to strip down for hard labor. And then in verse 3 he says, your nakedness will be exposed. And in biblical usage, uncovering someone's nakedness means at least extreme humiliation. And sometimes it can actually mean rape. So this is a very strong picture here. And exposing your nakedness is often used, as it is here, of a nation who has consorted with many nations and with many gods, and now only to appear naked and defenseless before them all.
I think the contrast is real when you think about the Super Bowl halftime. And the children say, I need to get out of here.
The other children, this is a great show. Because of what they've seen in the culture.
So verse 4 is interesting, don't you think? We just had this really rather awful picture of a privileged young woman being downgraded, humiliated into slave labor. And then we read, our Redeemer, the Lord Almighty is his name. Our Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel. Now, doesn't that seem like it doesn't belong? But this is the type of interjection that we have all the way through the book of Isaiah, isn't it? Where we go from one thing to the opposite, or to a totally different theme, but the connection between them is what we're supposed to see. How does this connect? Because immediately in the next verse he says, sit in silence, daughter of the Babylonians. He goes right back into the same picture. And we've seen this many times in Scripture, how the most important point that the author is making is always included right in the middle of a section. So he has verses 1 through 3, and then this interjection in verse 4, and then we have 5 through 7 afterwards, and that makes a section. And the most important thing is, who is the one who's doing this? It's our Redeemer. The destruction of Babylon is bringing our redemption, Israel. So the redemption of Israel meant the humiliation of Babylon. And that it was brought about by the great God. Let's continue with verse 5. Sit in silence. Go into darkness, daughter of the Babylonians. No more will you be called queen of kingdoms. I was angry with my people and desecrated my inheritance. I gave them into your hand, and you showed them no mercy. Even on the aged, you laid a very heavy yoke. You said, I will continue forever, the eternal queen. But you did not consider these things or reflect on what might happen. All right, so here he refers to, he says, sit in silence, go into darkness. And so Isaiah returns to his opening theme from verse 1, but this time he carries it on further. Not only is Babylon commanded to sit on the ground, but she is to sit in silence and to sit in darkness. Right? And he refers to Babylon as the queen of kingdoms. Babylon was an imperial city, having subjugated over 100 lesser kingdoms, but that reign would soon end. It's going to come to an end. And then he gives an explanation as to what has happened. I was angry with my people and desecrated my inheritance. And the only reason Babylon conquered Judah was because God had removed his protection and thus desecrated his nation. And what does Babylon say? I will continue forever, the eternal queen. This was truly her perspective of herself. Babylon had overthrown Assyria. Assyria had ruled the Middle East for 300 years. And Babylon was so great they were able to overthrow this eternal kingdom of Assyria. And now surely they were going to be the rulers forever. And they didn't stop and think that it might not be true, that there would be somebody who could overpower her, and that was a great God. You did not consider these things or reflect on what might happen. Now then, listen to this, God announces in verse 8. You wanton creature lounging in your security, and saying to yourself, I am, and there is none beside me. Wow. Have we not heard that phrase before? I am, and there is none beside me.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't we seen that many times that God has said this of himself? I exist because I am self-made. And that's what Babylon is saying. I am, and there is none beside me. I will never be a widow or suffer the loss of children. But God says both of these things will overtake you in a moment, on a single day. Loss of children and widowhood. They will come upon you in full measure in spite of your many sorceries and all your potent spells. So Babylon was proverbial in the ancient world for its development of the magic arts. Magic was designed to assure a good fortune and avoid misfortune. Right? But the very thing it was designed to do, it was not able to do when it was confronted by an all-powerful God. Verse 10, God says, you have trusted in your wickedness and have said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and knowledge mislead you when you say to yourself, I am, and there is none besides me. It says, you have trusted in your wickedness. Babylon felt secure in her magic arts. Her mastery had led her astray to believe that she could control her own destiny, and she only needed to perform the appropriate rituals in order to make things right. But in this belief system, there's no relevance to right or wrong. It's not that we're being rewarded for doing right. We're being rewarded for doing the right rituals. Right? And so then Isaiah becomes very sarcastic. Verse 12. Keep on then with your magic spells and with your many sorceries, which you have labored at since childhood. Perhaps you will succeed. Perhaps you will cause terror. If you want to know terror, just continue right on doing what you're going to do, because you're going to be terrified when you face a true God. All the counsel you have received has only worn you out. Let your astrologers come forward, those stargazers who make predictions month by month. Let them save you from what is coming upon you. And what are they worth, those astrologers? What kind of value do they have? Surely they are like stubble, and the fire will burn them up. They cannot even save themselves from the power of the flame. Here are no coals to warm anyone. Here is no fire to sit by. In other words, the destruction that was going to come was going to be like a fire. And those astrologers would be like stubble, just fuel fire for the fire. They weren't going to be able to, ward off the evil coming over the wall at all. They were going to be destroyed. And the fire that was coming was not just some nice little campfire that they could get themselves warm by. It was going to be a raging furnace. And it was going to destroy them all. That is all they can do for you. These you have labored with and trafficked with since childhood. Each of them goes on in his error. There is no one that can save you. So that's a terrible end. And it says, there is no one that can save you. Babylon desperately needed a savior, but there wasn't one. There wasn't one.
What's another translation say about in verse 15?
I don't know.
Those with whom you have wearied yourself are like this, those with whom you were in business from your youth. Each has wandered off on their own way, none will save you.
I was just about, in the New International Version, it says, those you have labored with in traffic since childhood. Just give them an image of what trafficking, of sexual trafficking of children. That's a Babylonian theme. The kids aren't worth anything except to be used for your own pleasure.
Okay.
It may be a little off, but this came to mind. This is rampant. And Christians are trying, Christian organizations are doing everything they can to stop this, but it's still increasing. What a mess.
I believe the word is sometimes translated, been in business with, or something along that line.
Mm-hmm.
So, you've had this this relationship with your gods, your false gods, where you pay them and they do something good for you, and this is the way you've done from childhood. But none of them are able to save you. You've had this. What's the word I'm looking for? I do for you and you do for me. Transactional relationship.
Oh, okay.
But it's not going to happen. They're not going to be able to save you. Okay. Well, this is rather a depressing chapter, and a depressing place to end. And I see that the title for the next chapter is Stubborn Israel. Doesn't sound like it's going to get a lot better next chapter either. But next week we're going to look at Isaiah 48, just one chapter, and if you're reading the Needham book, that is chapter 20. Let's close in prayer, shall we? Dear Father, as always, we thank you for your word. And we appreciate the reminder that there is nothing in this world that can save us, that we can place our faith in, that you are the only one who is our Redeemer, that you are the only one who delivers us, and you are our only Savior. And we praise you that we have come to know you. As always, we commit ourselves to your service, and we pray this in the name of your Son. Amen.
Amen.